Today we awaken to it. We release this treatment knowing so certainly it is done that we say, and so it is. Alrighty, well, we're getting ready for Christmas all around. It's hard not to see it everywhere you go. And usually this time of the year we want to stop a little bit and talk about, well, what is this thing called Christmas? What is this thing called the Christ? And where do we find this thing called the Christ? And I just want to put it kind of in a context that we've used before, but it's a very important one for us to first understand intellectually, first kind of have a mental concept to wrap around it. If you ever seen the glaziers putting a big window into a building, they have to have a handle to put on it. They have these handles that have these big suction cups on each end of it, and they put the suction cups onto the glass, and they throw a little lever that locks the suction cup in place. But they can use that handle, the handle with the suction cups, they can use that to grasp that which otherwise is ungraspable. There's no way there's no way they can pick up the window from just one side and put it into place. But with the suction cups, they can. It's quite interesting to see. They even have some that go on the end of, like, the boom of a small crane, and they can put that glass on there and raise it up a couple of floors and stick it into the window. So we have to have some sort of a concept to make sense of something, to at least get us started in the direction. But then, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, as in the Buddhist teaching of the raft, once we arrive on the other shore, we can let the concepts go. Because the concepts were never quite complete to start with. They were just a way of understanding, just a way of explanation. And they served their purpose. They pointed us in a direction. And once we move in that direction, we have no further need of the concept. We have the experience. We have no further need of the concept. So I'm going to kind of wander a little bit today as we talk about these things, because we are talking about that which is ineffable, that which is beyond words. So the concept that I want to lay out and ask everyone to just kind of consider is, if you look at the way that what we in our country tend to call the Bible, the scriptures, and remember, these are just one set of scriptures. There are many in the world. But the one that we are probably most familiar with, if you spend any time in a hotel room flipping through the Gideon Bible, it starts off with the book of Genesis. And in the book of Genesis, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, we have the innocence. We have the innocence of Adam and Eve. They don't know good from evil. They don't know right from wrong. They just are. Everything is wonderful. They are, the metaphor we were given, they are walking in the cool of the evening with the presence of the divine. See? But then something happens that causes a separation, or perhaps a separation caused them to do this thing. And this is to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it's an important choice of words, the knowledge of good and evil. Not that good and evil are reality, but they are ideas. They are ideas of separation. I can't remember who said the quote. I saw it last week when I was preparing for the talk last week, and it just said that, as soon as we make a judgment, just 1 inch of separation separates heaven from hell. As soon as we make a judgment, as soon as we take things that are and label them good or evil, there is a divide. But that divide is in our consciousness. It is in our thinking. As Shakespeare said, there's nothing right or wrong, but thinking makes it so. So we have, at the very beginning, the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, we have this metaphor laid out for us that talks about this time of innocence. And it is lost when the intellect comes in and starts labeling things as right or wrong, as good or bad. And then the rest of the Bible, if you look through the rest of the Bible, it is, to me, the way that I see it, and I'm just sharing you my opinions here, it is kind of the story of the soul's journey back to that experience of oneness, back to that place, as Rumi says, beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing. Back to a place of innocence, but not from the point of where we started, where we had no concept of good or evil. We moved into the concept of good and evil. We moved through the concept of good and evil, and we moved beyond the concept of good and evil, beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing. So the last book of the New Testament as we have it. So in Christianity, we've taken the Jewish Bible, what we call the Old Testament, would be called the Torah. It starts off with the book of Genesis. We combined it with the New Testament, and at the very end, the very last book, is the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation. And it is the revelation of St. John. And it is the mystical revelation. It is the revelation of the soul recognizing its unity, its oneness with the divine. This is the journey of the soul then, you see. So you and I are born into this experience. We don't remember the time where we existed in pure innocence of ideas, before the ideas of right doing and wrong doing. We were born into the world as infants. Where did we come from before we got here? We don't remember that. Most people don't remember that. But we arrive in the world as infants, totally innocent. As I said last week, if you bend down to pick up a baby and the baby grabs a piece of your jewelry, is it a thief? No, it has no intention of stealing. It doesn't know anything of that concept of ownership or possession or anything. It just sees something shiny and it grabs it. So we all start our life from that place, but then we learn. We go to school and we learn. And our parents teach us and our clergy teaches us. Excuse me while I get a drink. But then the journey is for us to make our way back into that experience of unity. And that is, to me, what is symbolized by the book of Revelation. Now, interesting, the book of Revelation is written in a mystical language of the time and the culture. And we don't understand that. See, we don't understand that. So the symbolism that's involved in all of these things, our culture does not understand. And we try to understand, and we try to make it into something that it is generally not. And if you want to go into that, I recommend look up Rocco Errico on the internet. Look up his organization. I think it's Noohra, Noohra. And I had at one time, it was a series of like 25 or 30 cassettes where he kind of went through each chapter of the book of Revelation, explained what it meant in the mystical symbolism of the Aramaic culture of the time, from where it came. But I think it's important that we understand that it is written in symbols because it is trying to describe an ineffable experience. It is trying to describe an experience that is beyond words, or before words, right? That which is before words, but from which words come. From the Upanishads, that which is before thought, but from which thought comes. And this ineffableness, this kind of, this acknowledgement that what we have experienced is beyond words. We don't have a concept for it. We can't put a label on it. It doesn't relate to anything that we have ever known before. And this is what I'm trying to say, is this handle, the suction cup handle, we try to find something to attach to it, to describe it, to communicate it, to convey to somebody what happened, what I experienced. We don't have the ability to do that. We do the best we can. But once they have the experience, we don't need that handle any longer. So one of the first concepts we want to hold on to temporarily is this concept of we are moving from this idea of the knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of division, the knowledge of separation. Right? This is what caused us to leave that period of innocence. But we are working our way back slowly to a different experience of the isness, of the suchness, of the I amness. And this is the experience of the Christ. Now, in our culture, in our present society, we have all kinds of symbols that we associate with Christmas, and people try to explain what Christmas means to them, and it probably means something slightly different to everybody. But what we want to think about is, what does this mean to us? What does this idea of the Christ mean to us? Because Christmas is about the celebration of the Christ. So if we're going to celebrate something, we need to have some idea of what that means to us, and not like Festivus on the TV, What does this mean to us? So Meister Eckhart was a mystic, a Catholic monk who lived around 1300 in Germany. And you've heard me say this before. Something was going on in Germany around 1300. We have some mystics that have come out of that area about the same time, and Eckhart was one of them. Hildegard was another. And Eckhart was a simple priest in a small parish somewhere in Germany. But he seemed to have this experience that we were talking about, this ineffableness, this experience. And he's trying to explain it week after week. He's trying to explain it to his congregation, trying to help them to desire to move towards that experience. And of course this got him in trouble with Rome, because he was encouraging people to go beyond what other places were teaching, which is just simply obey the rules, just do what you're told, just obey the rules, keep the commandments, go to church on Sunday, and then when you die, everything will be taken care of. And Eckhart seemed to be coming from a place of, that's not enough. See, that's not enough. It's not enough just to get through this world. We want to have that experience of the presence of the divine, the Christ. So what Eckhart told his congregation on a Christmas Eve service, when we were kids, I grew up in the Catholic Church. When we were kids, we always went to midnight mass on Christmas Eve. This was a big holy day for us, and I imagine it was as well in the year 1300. And what he said to his congregation has always struck me. He said to them, "We are here today to celebrate the birth of a child some 1300 years ago in Palestine. But unless you know what that means to you personally, it might as well never have happened." And I thought to myself, wow, for him to say that in the environment he was in, wow. Because up until then, everybody was told, just follow the rules, just do what you're told, just obey the commandments, just contribute to the support of the church, just keep your head down, don't make waves, follow the rules, you'll be okay. And Eckhart was challenging his people, motivating his people, encouraging his people, and he was saying, unless you personally know what that means to you, it might as well never have happened. So this is what I'm talking about today. What is this thing called the Christ that we are celebrating? What does it mean to us personally? And if it's something worth exploring, then what are we willing to do? What are we willing to do to move into what St. John called the revelation? The revelation. Now, you've heard me talk over the years about the 3 levels of how our consciousness matures through 3 levels, and I acknowledge that psychologists will talk about 8 different levels, and that's fine. You can take the 8 and drop a couple in category 1, category 2, category 3. If you understand the 3, you understand the 8. You know, and if you don't understand the 3, you don't understand the 8 kind of thing. But at the first level, as we begin this awakening process, and this is what this is. This is what enlightenment is. This is what awakening is. We are coming to realize something that already is there, you see. We are not trying to create anything anew. We're not trying to discover something anew. We are trying to experience that which already is. But we are not currently experiencing it because the ideas of separation are keeping us from it, and they are only ideas. Excuse me while I get some more water here. So we start this journey, and our world is one that is full of rules and regulations and authority, and there's people out there that have all the power, there's people out there that have all the money. They tell us what to do. We do what they tell us to do, and they give us something. Maybe you're a small child and you want money to buy a toy, and you have to go to your parents, and you have to figure out how to get your parents to give you money to buy the toy or to buy the toy for you, that kind of thing. We go to work later on and we get a paycheck. We go to school and we need to get a good grade. We have to do what the teacher tells us to do if we are going to get a good grade. But my point is that at that level of life, our orientation is that everything is out there. See, everything is out there. Power is out there. Money is out there. God is out there. God is out there, away out there in heaven. Even though the major teachers of the world will tell us that this thing that we call God is omnipresence, it is all presence, we are taught that somehow it is out there. Somehow we are separated from it. Somehow we have to make our way back to it because it's out there somewhere. We then, and in religions, we create religions like that. You know, the God is over there, we're over here, and we need intermediaries to go back and forth for us. You know. But then we move to the second level. And the second level, we start to see this whole thing as more of a team effort, if you want to call it that. Well, God is out there, but God is also in here. And I am a human being, but I am also a spiritual being. Or maybe I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And at this point, instead of just following the rules, instead of just doing what we're told, and there's nothing wrong with following rules. I mean, Emmett Fox tells us this. The commandment that says don't steal from one another is a good commandment. It was good advice before Moses came along. But there's more to it. See, there's more to it. So we enter that second category, and now we are on a quest almost, a quest of knowledge, a quest of experience, a quest of learning, of finding out more. You know, if the divine is really here in me, how do I know that? Why would that be so? As St. Paul said, who am I that the divine is even mindful of me? But we have sort of this deep thirst for knowledge, this deep thirst for experience. And we start at first our journey of gaining experience, our experience through the teachings of others, through the experience of others, almost vicariously. So we read about what somebody else did or what somebody else said or what somebody else taught. We read about all those things. But that serves as kind of a direction for us. It serves as kind of an inspiration for us. But at some point we have to say, well, wait a second. Where did all of these people get their knowledge from? And is that knowledge not available to me within, directly, intellectually? We say then that the divine is omnipresence, but it's also omniscience. It's also omniscience. And it's all powerful. So we start to wonder then, if all wisdom, if all knowledge is with that all presence and that all presence is within me, then that knowledge must be here. And in addition to going out and reading what other people have written or listening to what other people say, our sincere desire then becomes one of making that contact within, discovering it within. This point where the divine becomes human is what I would call the Christ, the presence of the divine within the human. Now I invite you in your textbooks to go read the text Dr. Holmes wrote in the Science of Mind textbook on finding the Christ. And it's very interesting because just as John, in writing the book of Revelation, fell into symbolism and into the mythology of this time and this place, when Dr. Holmes starts to write and try to explain the Christ to us, the same thing seems to happen to him because he falls into poetry. He falls into poetry. I think of all of the chapters in the textbook, he does this from time to time. He will break from prose and go into poetry. But in this chapter, I think he did it more than in any other chapter. And when I look at that, I get the image of somebody who is feeling this presence, someone who is feeling their unity with this presence and trying to explain it, just as John was trying to explain it. Part of the problem, as I said, is we don't have a handle. We don't have words. We don't have concepts. We don't have images. We don't exactly know how to express this. Last Wednesday night, our group watched a documentary on the lives of Timothy Leary and Ram Dass, and it's about death and dying. It's about their views on death and dying as Leary gets towards the end of his life. But they had to start the documentary by delving back into their past in the 60s when they were at Harvard, and they were involved in these experiments with psychedelic drugs, the active ingredient in mushrooms and later LSD and those kind of things, which they were researching from an experimental point of view. Was this something that could be used, for example, to help treat patients in psychiatric patients, those kind of things? But they took the drugs themselves. And the one thing that Ram Dass, when he was talking to Timothy Leary, the one thing that he said was, he says, well, without the spiritual understanding, you have no context for the experience. It's just kind of a bunch of jumbled things going by. But with a spiritual context, then it starts to be a way that we can grab onto it. We can grab onto it. And there's actually one scene in there with Leary testifying before Congress, and trying to explain a psychedelic experience to him. And he goes on and he goes on and explains what happened. He says, now, he says, this might sound like nonsense to you, but if you go back to the Hindu scriptures, you'll see that this is the third dream of Vishnu. And I don't know what that is. I haven't looked that up yet. But the point that was being made there is people did not have a concept, they did not have a context, they could not understand what was going on, but the mystics have experienced it. The mystics have experienced it. So I believe Dr. Holmes, and one of the things I learned about Holmes in my years of studying is that from time to time he had what he called experiences of cosmic consciousness, the mystical experience. But he didn't want to talk about it. He thought people might think that he was different or strange or something like that. And he wanted people at that level that he was teaching, which is in this second level that I am talking about. He wanted people to focus on learning the law and learning how to use the law, so that each and every time somebody goes into the spiritual practice of treatment, what they're doing is they are using a specific technique, a specific spiritual practice that is in fact bringing them closer in their experience, closer in their understanding to the divine. He says, with all you're getting, you have to get God. Not about getting stuff, it's about getting closer to the divine. So what I just relayed to you one time, and I think it was in Bill Hornaday, he wrote some biographical information about Ernest Holmes. I think they were called the Holmes Papers, and you can still get them from DeVos or DeVos, whatever the name of the publishing company is. But Dr. Holmes was at the dedication of a new church. I think it was in Glendale, California, Glenwood, California, Glen something, California. And he was on the podium, and he was making some remarks to the congregation that had gathered. And he stopped, and he said something to the effect of, "Oh yes, 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 I see it now. The veil is so thin." And he sat down. He just turned from the lectern, and he went and he sat down. And everybody was concerned, what had happened to him, and was he ill, and those kind of things. And afterwards he told Dr. Hornaday, he said as he was speaking, he says, everybody in the audience, the human forms just melted away, and all he could see was little points of light. He could see spirit, what he considered to be spirit. He could see through the veil, beyond the human. He had this, what he called this experience, an experience of cosmic consciousness. So when he was trying to write this chapter, I believe, in reading it and trying to read it, I believe that he slipped into poetry over and over, because somehow poetry seems to get a little bit beyond the intellect, or pierce the intellect, or get through the intellect, kind of like music. I love the idea that music kind of passes right through the guards that we have at our consciousness, and we feel things. We feel the music, we feel the emotion. Now, some of it is learned. You and I might learn some songs, and they're very sad songs, and in another culture, that exact same melody might be happy. Those parts are learned. But without a doubt, there's something about music that penetrates the intellect, that goes through the intellect, that passes the intellect, that without knowing major from minor or sevenths from fifths, or any of those things, there's something that we feel, something that we feel. And we can't convey that. We can't convey that. Why do you feel when you hear music? Well, what do you feel when you hear music? We have the experience, but we can't share the experience. So the idea then is that the evolution of our soul is as we go through that level where it's about rules and regulations and pleasing others, we go through that phase where it's about learning and growing and studying and becoming the best we can. And eventually it's the experience of the oneness, the experience of the unity, the conscious realization, this is the way Holmes puts it, the conscious realization of the activity, the conscious realization of the experience of the activity and the presence of the divine. The conscious realization of the experience. We are experiencing it, and we are aware that we are experiencing it, as opposed to we are experiencing it all the time and we are unaware that we are experiencing it. We are breathing all the time and we are unaware that we are breathing. Now, just a little side here, learning to meditate, a lot of times we're taught to focus on our breath. Inhale, exhale, count one, om, all these kind of things. And they're all good. Single point meditation is good. I was reading a book one time and it said, yeah, so you're doing that, but what is your breath? Now think about that. What is your breath? You're concentrating on your breath, but are you concentrating on your breath? No, I'm concentrating on my body moving. I'm concentrating on the sensation of air passing through my nostrils. What is my breath? The sensation in the nerves in the end of my nose. What is my breath, you see? And it starts to take us into the intellectual understanding that we are not experiencing the breath. We are experiencing the activity of the breath, but not experiencing the breath yet. And the point of the book that I was reading was keep meditating until you experience the actual breath. The actual breath. So we are on this evolutionary journey of the soul. We are moving from the pure innocence through the point where we start judging everything to the point where we come back and we recognize the unity of everything. And it is this experience of unity. It is this experience of oneness. It is the experience of the divinity. This is the discovery of the Christ. Now, we have to kind of think in symbols. We have to kind of understand in symbols because, as I say, words don't get it. Words don't get it. It's not an intellectual exercise. I say this over and over again. God is not an intellectual exercise. God is not a mathematical problem to be solved. You know, there's no equation we can write down and say, and that equals God. It is not an intellectual experience. So when the intellect begins to fail us, we resort to symbols because the symbols convey things that have meaning to the intellect without words. I hear beautiful music and it does something to me, but there's no words. There's no words, you see. I have a beautiful experience and I want to express it and I go to poetry. Because somehow poetry can convey the emotion, the feeling that words alone can't. Rumi's poem on the lovers at sunrise just popped into the back of my mind. Here's an example. You know, you can say to somebody, "I love you," and they can say, "I love you" back. And Rumi takes that a step further and he says, there's two lovers at sunrise and one turned to the other and said, do you love me? How much do you love me? And the other one picked up a ruby. Where the ruby came from, I don't know, but they picked up a ruby and they held it up to the sunlight. And they said, you can't tell where the ruby begins and the sun ends. This is my love for you. There's something in the symbolism, in that poetry, in this idea of the sunlight penetrating the ruby, of your presence animating my soul. You see, something so beautiful, so wonderful in that we get it. We get it. And if I just wrote out, or Rumi just wrote out a line of prose that says, I love you as much as the sunshine loves the ruby, people would go, huh? What does that mean? So we drop back into the symbolism. We drop back into trying to use metaphors, to use symbols, to use poetry, to use the language of the book of Revelation to try to explain the unexplainable. How do you experience anything? Where do you experience anything? And it's somewhere within. It's somewhere within. How do you know anything? You only know anything because you've experienced it. Even if I go over mathematics and I say 2 + 2 = 4 and you nod your head, where did you agree? Somewhere within. Somewhere within. You heard words, you heard sounds, you translated those sounds to mean words, you translated the words to mean mathematics, and then somewhere within you agreed because you have experienced through your studies, through your actual playing with stones or whatever you do, that yes, indeed, 2 + 2 = 4. In the symbolism of Buddhism, if you think of the 7 chakra system, or the symbolism of the East, maybe this comes to us from the Hindus, I'm not sure. But there's a different symbol for each of the energy centers. And the energy center for the heart is a symbol of a downward pointing triangle overlaid on an upward pointing triangle. This is the point where the human meets the divine, the heart. Incidentally, if you take an upward pointing triangle and lay it over a downward pointing triangle, you will get a 6-pointed star, like the Star of David. Is that possibly a symbol for the same thing? I don't know. But the thought has crossed my mind. So the symbolism there is that at this point where we are normally thinking of feeling nature, of love as being in our heart, it is at that point that we start to discover, to experience the divine. Think of the chakras below that, and what are they about? Right? They're about survival, they're about reproduction, they are about willpower and control, and all of these things that divide and separate. But when we start to come to love, we start to experience oneness. At first only with a small group, or friends or family or beloveds. But we start to experience that oneness. Also in the mythology of Buddhism, the Buddha was born from his mother's side. The concept of the Buddha comes from the heart. The concept of our unity with all life comes from the heart. Now we switch over to Christianity, and the symbol of Christianity is the cross. And if you think of the cross, if you think of a human body stretched out on a cross, the intersection of the horizontal and the vertical is at the heart. Is at the heart. And we are also told in this symbolism, right, that the child Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. And we're going to talk more about this next week. From the Holy Ghost, from the Holy Spirit, was born without a human father. And the symbolism of that is that the awareness of the presence of the divine within us is not a human function. It is a divine function. So at the heart, at the heart center, at the feeling center, we start to come into the awareness that the divine, by whatever term we choose to call it, that the divine is expressing itself as the human. As the human. We start to realize then that this thing that we call our life is its life as me, through me. And it can only express through me to the level of my acceptance, to the level of my agreement, to the level of my understanding, to the channel or the avenue, as Dr. Holmes might say, the avenue that we give it. I've used the metaphor before of water trying to get through a crack in a rock or a dam, and the entire river is backed up. But how much of the river can come through that little hole is only as big as the hole we give it. Okay? If we want more water to come through, we need to make a bigger hole. Years ago, I heard a minister give a talk about going to the ocean to get water. And you can take a whiskey glass or you can take a bucket. Now the ocean doesn't care. You can take as much water as you want from the ocean. But if you take the whiskey glass, you're only going to get a little. If you take the bucket, you're going to get more. If you take a hose and a pump, you're going to get a lot more. This opening for the experience of the presence of the divine, the Christ, the point where the divine becomes human, this is something that we must participate in willfully, willingly. Right? So, what is the Christ? And the Christ is a principle, Dr. Holmes would tell us, meaning that it's not limited to just one person, but that the Christ is something that exists within every one of us, but needs to be discovered, needs to be revealed. It is already here. You and I did not create ourselves. We did not create our bodies. We do not move our hearts. There is some presence, some power, some force, if you want to call it that, in the universe that is already with us. In our spiritual journey then, the raft, I talked a couple weeks ago about the raft that we want to take across the apparent chasm is to get us from this idea of separation to this idea of oneness, from this experience of separation to this experience of unity. So what this is the conscious realization of the experience of the oneness. And this is something that when we read about the people who have the mystical experiences, and even when we were listening to people talk about their experiences of the psychedelic experiences, when you listen to people who are talking about the experience of near-death experiences, they talk about this feeling of oneness, this feeling of unity. Now we go through life thinking that we are separated from everything else and everything else is different than we are. We get an intellectual idea and, well, no, we're all part of the same whole. Then we get another intellectual idea that says, well, actually the whole is expressing itself as us. Not just like we're part of it. We are it. We are it. And then we can actually have an experience where we experience the oneness of it. We experience it. I still am, but there's nothing that I exclude. I feel the oneness. I am the oneness, you see. I and the Father are one from the New Testament. Now, sometimes we have little glimpses of this as we go through life. We have these little flashes of it. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we do. We have these little flashes of it. Called the aha moment. Aha. What was that? Aha. Something just happened here. What is that, you see? And it's like a taste of honey. Then we want more, and we want more, and we want more. What was I doing when that occurred? Did I do something that caused it? You know, all of these kind of questions we start to ask. And what we're really asking is, how do I find it? How do I find it? I know what it is, the experience of the oneness, the actual experience of the fact that the divine has become human as me, and I am one with everything. The mystical experience, the cosmic consciousness experience. Now, how do I find it? How do I get it? And it's very interesting because it's like grabbing water. You know, if you put your hand in the pond and you try to grab water, you're not going to be able to get a hold of it. But your hand is already wet, you see. You have to realize that it's already wet. You have to experience that it's already wet. So what we want to consider then, what we want to consider this journey as we move through this Christmas experience is that it's placed at the end of the year. It's wonderful it's placed at the end of the year for a reason, because it allows us to, we start our journey every January by trying to think about, what do we know? How do I know what I know? But by December, we want to come to the point that says, I want to experience it. That's what I want. Dr. Holmes tells us that we spend a lot of time talking about the law and learning about the law and using the law. And remember, I said that this is a means to an end, because every time we use it, we in some way grow a little bit closer to God. He says once we have the experience, we can stop talking about the law because it works automatically anyway. Think about that. If we didn't know what gravity was, we might spend a lot of time talking about gravity and writing formulas about gravity and designing water wheels based on how gravity is going to turn them and all these kind of things. But once we just kind of understand that gravity is, we don't need to make those formulas anymore. We just build a little dam and put a little pipe and build a little water wheel, and we're good to go. It is the experience, the actual experience of the oneness that we desire. Now, where are we going to find it and how are we going to find it? The only place that we're ever going to find it is within. Is within. It's not out there. It's within. And the only way we're going to do that is to take time to be alone with it. We can, through the activity of directing our consciousness, we can bring our consciousness to acknowledge the presence. We can bring our consciousness to sit in awe at the magnificence of what it is and what it does. But again, we're told in the New Testament, go within. Go in your prayer closet and close your door and be at home with the beloved. So this is what we must do. We must take time to be alone, to be still, and to just listen. It's already here. It's waiting in quiet repose. Eckhart also told his congregation that God is like the child who plays hide and seek and clears its throat so that it will be sure to be discovered. The very love of God, the very presence of God, the very life that animates you, the very life that you are, is lying in quiet repose, saying, here I am. Discover me. This is the year, this is the time for us to simply be still. Be still and know. And allow that love, excuse me, to express through us, to express as us, to overwhelm us. We must recognize that we are so much more than what we have ever believed. Can we believe that the presence is already here? Can we believe that we have the ability to be quiet enough to hear it? And are we willing to do that? I think we are. And so it is.